being an owner operator, that's a community service business in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're providing housing to the community, right? And if you can do a superior job doing that, you will make great cash flow. And there's very few landlords out there with 5-star Google ratings, because I think for a few reasons. Number one, people are looking at real estate as like cash flow.
Yeah, it's an
right?
investment.
Right, so they're just like, they're
not
pounding
thinking people
away, right? They're not, exactly right. They're not thinking people, they're not thinking community. Like when I turn over apartments, I think of like, all right, there's a kid that lives in this unit,
mm-hmm.
right? Like he is gonna have memories in this unit. How do we make this like equitable for the kid?
Dude, we all have the best time ever to start a small business.
If I'm not gonna be 100% in, I'm not gonna do it.
Come on, man, just be yourself.
Yeah,
and just show up as yourself.
If you don't realize what I'm really about, I'm about freedom, family, and my country.
Chris, cheers.
Cheers.
I've been joining you, but I'm trying to drop some LBs.
Appreciate
you. Any good?
Appreciate you having me. Excellent choice.
Trevor picked it up.
Thank you, Trevor.
I didn't know his style.
He's on point.
So for the people who are going to see this that know you, right, your loved ones, your friends, people who do business with you, I want those people to understand what Fireside America is all about. And it's about turning around and helping the next guy or girl online get to that place of financial freedom. And what that means to a bunch of different people is a bunch of different things. And I know your cousin, Nick, very well for a long time, and he's always been saying, you got to talk to Chris, you got to talk to Chris. I'm like, I'm not really a real estate guy, right? I had clients who are in real estate, but it wasn't my thing. And recently, Trevor West saw you at a thing speaking at Source Brewery. He's like, he's a good dude. You know, I liked his wife too. Let's connect with him. And quickly, when I got to talking to you, I'm like, this guy is a wealth of knowledge. And he now realizes he's at a point in his life where he wants to continue to grow, but he also wants to turn around and help. And you want to get on these platforms because years ago, call it 18 years ago, you started real estate.
Sure.
You didn't really have things like YouTube and Instagram and the world that we have today. So I'm glad to have you on and give you a platform to speak about what it is that you do. Hopefully you inspire someone, drop some good nuggets for the real estate people. And really glad that you're here.
Thank you.
Cheers again.
Appreciate it.
So, Jersey guy, Bricktown, parents born and raised in Italy, came over. How old was your parents when they came over?
My dad was 11.
11, wow.
Mom? Around 10 or 11. My mom's actually born in the U.S., but she's Italian too.
She is Italian.
So there's that. They have that cultural connection.
Yeah, there was something there. Quickly, she liked that Italian boy off the boat.
A lot of it.
So, I'm going to fast track your life.
Sure.
Go to school in Brick.
Sure.
Went to CBA.
Sure.
Shout out to all the CBA guys that watch. And at what age did you really desire wanting to be successful, and more particular in real estate?
That's a good question. I would say that probably 12, 13, 14, I was starting to think about, money and like how to make money. And, when you're from an immigrant family, like, I think a lot of the push is education, doctor, lawyer, engineer. But, I wasn't sure what direction I was going in. But I think the immigrant focus is like, if you can get educated, you won't be poor. Mm-hmm. But I don't really think that there's necessarily a connection between, getting super educated and making a bunch of money or growing your net worth.
Well, educated could be different, right? I could be really educated in what I do, and I never went to a lick of college.
Sure. Yeah, I'm talking strictly about formal education. Like the European immigrants, and actually it's probably more than just European immigrants, but it was always about like
Indians
the
are big
diploma, the college, the grad school, So probably around 13, 14 is when I was telling you when we first met, I saw Carlton Sheets, and that's when I started to think a little bit more creatively, right? Because when you're 12, 13, like, what's really going on? You
don't know anything.
You don't know anything, right? Like you're going to school, you're probably in 8th grade, 9th grade, right? And that's when I saw Carlton Sheets, and back then it was like, that was marketing. There was no Instagram, there was nothing. And I just remember him poolside talking about doing real estate with no money down, And I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's you were thinking so much bigger than me. I was just like, I guess I was a knuckle dragger. I guess in a sense I still am. I was thinking like, how do I move more railroad ties and cut more lawns and shovel more driveways for money? Because my dad was a truck driver, which he's a hard worker. I'm not knocking that at all. And my mom worked at the nursing home playing bingos with the old people.
Sure.
So sometimes you have this limiting belief.
Sure.
And it's instilled in you from the culture you're around, the people you're around.
Sure.
But somehow this Carlton sheet struck something in you at that age to start thinking real estate, and I can buy it with no money.
Right.
And I think that's what all these podcasts are about, and reading books are about, or going to events and getting in the room, stroking checks, and being able to pick that brain of somebody who did it before you.
Sure.
And that's what you're now doing today, giving that information to somebody else.
Sure.
So CBA guy, how did you like CBA?
If you want to judge an environment by a communal aspect and by instilling some spiritual foundation and having somewhat of a brotherhood where everyone's working hard, trying hard, and dialed into the right things, right? Like athletics, community, academics. Have no regrets.
Yeah, it's a big network there.
Big network. I think like if you want to dial into that network even now, there's like very much a sense of community, which I think is important. I think people need support. I think life's tough. And I think the more support networks that you can dial into, probably the better for everybody.
Yeah, I would agree. We've had about 5 or 6 CBA guys on, including one in the Hall of Fame, Basil Iwanek. He's a Hollywood producer.
Okay.
He produced all of the John Wick movies, We Are Marshall, Sicario, big Hollywood guy, but he was a Jersey guy.
Right on.
And he just came back to Jersey. I won't say where he lives because he's got some stalkers. But they just inducted him, I think, last year back into the Hall of Fame in CBA. Yeah. And I always see the events that they're throwing and all those guys. Scalfani's very involved. Joseph Hughes, too. We probably had about 7 CBA guys on.
Nice.
I think you're now 8.
Nice.
So obviously the community is filled with guys who have that entrepreneur-driven thought process, which is probably driven through sports. As we embark, and I won't get too deep down this hole, but as we embark on raising our kids, we really have questioned public school recently.
Sure.
And private is definitely the route we're going to go. Right now, we're looking at Apogee. Our friends are launching a school. It's very different. It's not driven by academics. Academics will be a part of it, but it's more so driven by like real life.
Sure.
And they call it there's a particular word they use often. Tim Kennedy does, socialcratic. Is it socialcratic? I'm gonna get it wrong, but it's really interesting because I felt that I would have thrived in that environment versus the academics.
Sure.
I could listen to a book. I'm not good at reading it.
Right.
Right. I was visual. You can draw on the board the whole class, and I can remember everything you talked about in history. If you gave it to me in a sheet, I wouldn't do it. Right. So it's cool to see the difference between public school kids that grew up, and I'm not saying there's not a shit ton of successful people in the country that went to public school, but there's really a big difference in those private institutions, to your point, and even college, a fraternity.
Sure.
Fraternity brothers you can lean on for life, the networking there. So it was great. So you did go off to college.
I did.
Did you do a real estate deal while in high school?
No. It ties in pretty interestingly. I saw the Carlton Sheets no money down program, and the program back then was like cassettes or CDs. And then after college, when I told you I met my buddy Artem, right around the graduation of college, I made an offer on a piece of property in New Jersey, and a year had passed by. And after that year of us making an offer on that property, the real estate agent called me back December 26th. And she said, look, the offer that you made a year ago, if you're still interested, the property's available. It just got sold at the sheriff's sale. And I said, wow, that's super interesting. I said, let me think about it and I'll call you back. So I called her back and I said, look, what do I need to do here to get the property? We're in that like 5-day redemption period where like the foreclosure auction at the sheriff's sale takes place. And then you have the ability to buy that property from the person that was theoretically foreclosed on. So, she said, look, you have to call the sheriff's office. So I called the sheriff's office, and they said, look, if you come down here with a check, you can buy the house. So I called the property owner, the girl that had almost gotten foreclosed on, and I said, look, if I give you $1,000 and keep you out of foreclosure, will you sign the deed over? She said yes. So I asked my parents for a hard money loan. I went to the sheriff's office. I bought the property from the sheriff's office and got the deed signed over from the owner, and then took the deed, which was in my name, went to Wells Fargo and got a home equity line of credit to fix the house. So I was 14 when I saw Carlton Sheets, and I was probably 23 or 24 when I did my first deal, which was a no money down deal.
So 10 years later.
After college.
Yeah. Now, quickly going back to college, did you feel it was really worth it? I know you met some great people. You referenced your buddy, and he was a big help to you.
Sure.
Besides the institutional side of the networking, was it worth it to you? Because you said your parents are big on it. Like, I'm not going to fight them. They're hardworking people. They've provided this great education for me. I got to go.
That's well said, Ryan. I think, I don't know how birth order fits into this, or maybe it doesn't, but I wanted to please my parents. Mm-hmm. So I went to college, right? That was the natural next step from Christian Brothers Academy. Because remember, at CBA, nobody ever came to me and said, look, you could be a real estate developer. You could be a landlord. Mm-hmm. So when you're 14, 15, 16, you're heavily influenced by your external environment. When you don't know how to push back, you're not thinking super independently. There's a lot of forces coming in, and you're trying to maneuver these things and understand, and you don't know who you are.
You almost guilted into it. This is the track I'm supposed to take.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, college was my next step after CBA. But even at college, I said to my parents, I'm studying. I have 2 majors. I'm trying hard. I want to do the right thing. I want to make you guys happy. But by the way, in New Brunswick, I went to Rutgers College. So in New Brunswick, in 2005-06, or 2004 even, these 2 and 3 family houses that students lived in were $400,000 to $600,000. So even at that time, I was lobbying my parents, let me get a real estate license. And they were like, no. So again, it was I was just doing the basic math, because I was bartending at that time and waitering. So I'm looking at the math, and I'm just if I get a real estate license and I could be involved with real estate while I go to school, but their view was you may tap out on college.
Yeah.
If you get that license.
Yeah.
So real estate was it kept surfacing.
And that generation, to defend your parents or any parents from that generation, they're working hard and really hard. What did your father do?
So he worked at a furniture installation company, and started off probably, I imagine he was probably in his early to mid 20s, and he spent 27 years there.
Wow.
So he was there for a while, worked his way up, tried hard.
His hump.
Hardworking guy.
So that hardworking mentality for that generation is I don't want my kids to have to do this. Not that they weren't proud of what they were doing, and they were providing a good lifestyle, and they were able to send you to a great private high school.
Sure.
But they were a lot of times laying their full life on the line. They would go without a new car, or they would go without things to give their kids a better life. And I think that generation was still really big on college. I think that has changed a lot.
Sure.
I think a lot of people have been hey, you can go other routes. I think you would have been successful without college. College also helped you in your success. So it didn't hurt you, but you could have got started maybe a little bit sooner. You would have had more interest.
Sure.
Oddly enough, your brother never went to college though, right? He's an electrician.
He is.
Did he go to college?
No.
No, right? Just went to a trade school. So the next born got away with it.
But I also think my brother was very good about recognizing how he fit into the world. Mm-hmm. And also probably saw that there's ways to push and pull on your parents. That someone that's firstborn, because I'm 5 years older. Mm-hmm. When you're 5 years older, you don't. Yeah. You're the one that I think is used to the heat.
Yeah.
Where the
Pressure was
second
on.
born, like, if you think about it, your parents are now, like, I was raised, or I should say, like, my parents were 21 or 22 when they had me. They were 27 when they had him.
Yeah, there's
There's a pretty exponential difference between a 21-year-old and a 27-year-old or a 26-year-old.
huge.
You know, so I think my brother benefited by having parents that were like maybe a little more exhausted.
Yeah.
But I also think he had like a very clear skill set. He was like, he was very binary. I don't like really like the scholastic part of school, right? Like I call the normal school, I call it scholastics. It's not smarts, right? Because I don't like when people say, oh, I'm smart, I'm not smart. That's the school's category of smart. That's a scholastic component.
Yeah.
There's a whole, I don't even know how to define smart, right? Like intellect is like maybe knowing certain things, but intelligence is like kind of putting it all together to make it work.
A guy said to me one day, and I was coming into finance and a little insecure, you know, you're coming up and there's all these guys from Rutgers with finance degrees, and there's about 18 of us in the new trainee class.
Sure.
And he pulled me to the side one time, and I was like, you know, these fucking guys, he goes, don't worry about that. He goes, you can't judge a fish's ability, you can't judge a fish's intelligence on its ability to climb a tree.
Right.
I was like, well, that fucking makes a lot of sense, because a fish will never climb a tree, you know? And that really always stuck with me. You know, we're drilled in our head back to formal education.
Sure.
That if you don't thrive there, you can't go find success. How many developers never finished 8th grade?
100%.
Right? How many guys that own, you know, probably, you know, $200 million portfolios that never graduated high school or college?
Sure.
Again, same thing in finance. A lot of people don't realize if you have the ability to go get your insurance license in a Series 6 and a Series 7, like you can go manage $400 million.
Sure.
And people don't realize that. Now, to pass those tests, don't get me wrong, you have to be pretty damn smart, and it is a lot of hard work.
Sure.
At least you know the laws.
Right.
But that didn't take a college degree for me to go do that.
Right.
And it's just interesting how the different family dynamics play into everybody's world, but you obviously have taken the good and the bad with it. So you get your first deal, you win this house. Did you flip it? Did you end up in the green?
Yeah, I think I made a few bucks.
How did it feel after that?
You know, I was super fortunate. Honestly, I'm like so grateful that like, I think whenever you start something, the way that you start will have like a lasting effect. Because I think when you're young, everything's so impressionable, and it's very
It's like your
emotional.
first time of everything.
Yeah. And that's gonna maybe set the rudder in one direction or another in terms of how you feel about the next time, or the acceleration of the business, or where it's gonna go from there. But I was so fortunate that I found it, at that time, even though I GC'd the project, I guess you could say, like I just had a very good contractor, you know, and I'm still friends with the guy. Like all these years later, he just did the trim work and stuff on the custom home that I just built. So like it's a testament to the relationship. So project was fine in the sense that it was a success. No principal dollars were lost.
Yeah.
Nobody retired off the project. It was nice to have family and friends involved with the project, you know, but it was fine.
So from there, where did you go with your real estate career? Because you got your real estate license.
Yeah.
Did you get it right away, or you got it years later as you're doing all the transaction, realizing you're paying a lot of fees to do so?
You know, I got the license just because I think that, you know, if you have the license, like, you know, it's kind of like it's your gateway into the business, right? Like you don't need it, but if you have it, it gives you like the most basic. It gives you MLS access, right? It gives you, like a sort of a layer of a foundation.
Base
right?
education.
Exactly. And I was no stranger to school, and I'm like, you know what? It's a simple class, you know?
Would you suggest that somebody looking to get into any aspect, and we talked about earlier, there's so many different aspects of real estate.
Sure.
Would you recommend that someone went and got it, whether they were going to go work for a brokerage and sell or not?
I think I probably would. Only because if I look at the argument the other way, like what would be the reason not to get it? Because if you have it, right? If you have it,
it's not like it takes a year to get.
Yeah, it doesn't take a year to get. I think it's reasonably simple. And I think if you have it and you disclose that you have it, you can still do all the activities of someone that doesn't have it.
Yeah.
Whether that's wholesaling deals, fixing and flipping deals, representing deals that you fixed and flipped on the MLS. Like, I think it's all just about transparency and disclosure. And if you're gonna let the community know that you have the license, then I think everyone understands it's a reasonably level playing field.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
It's a nice nugget there if you're looking to do real estate.
Sure.
So, moving your story along, because I want to squeeze as much information as I can in an hour. What was the next target that you really started to say, I want to go after, and that's the niche I'm going to be in?
Sure. Well, for better or for worse, I got into commercial real estate, which, my buddy put it really well. He's like, you went from high school to the pros. So probably all of my childhood friends went and got jobs, whether it was on Wall Street or at energy companies or they went to medical school. They all got jobs. I got a real estate license and I got into selling apartment buildings, which, like I said, a good analogy is like you went from high school to the pros. And what I mean by that is when you sell apartment buildings in New Jersey or maybe anywhere, but for sure Metro New York, you are doing business in an international way because a lot of the groups or people or high net worth families that are owning those deals they're investor pros. I mean, if you really think about like who owns apartment buildings, right? So like my entry into real estate was cold calling owners of apartment buildings. And my first job was at a very boutique real estate firm. And they were around for a super long time.
What was the name of it?
Gerber Soma, small company in Hackensack. They were around for a long time. And like one of the partners was 82, the other one was 60, maybe 62.
A lot of experience and wisdom there.
Super experienced businessmen, great deal makers. They own a lot of stuff themselves. And basically, like I went to Elizabeth, New Jersey, and I got dropped off. And they were like, your job is to find the owners of all these buildings, come back to the office, and cold call them. So my day was split from driving from Ocean County to Hackensack, or I should say Ocean County to sometimes Union County, cataloging these buildings, going to Hackensack, cold calling these guys, and then going back to MBA school. Because after college, my parents were like, look, you seem to be pretty decent at school, or at least you try hard. We think you should go to grad school. And I'm like, I don't know about that. They were like, if you go to grad school now, we'll pay for it. If you don't go to grad school now, we won't pay for it. And, like I said, that some of that, that birth order influence was there. So I said, fine, I'll go. So I went to MBA school for real estate. So I was going to MBA school for real estate and trying to sell apartment buildings. And it was a grind, man.
Yeah.
Selling commercial real estate.
Cold calling
that's a tough
sucks in
business.
anything, dude.
Yes.
Let alone commercial real estate where you got the sharks.
Sure does.
So, you were selling them. At what point did you say, I want to buy this? You were obviously seeing the deals that were going on.
Sure.
When you go and you're trying to sell a product
Sure.
or a service, a lot of times, and I tell people this is the nugget, you get paid to do the things you don't get paid to do.
Sure.
So you're helping go in and analyze maybe a building or an apartment complex,
Sure.
and then selling that guy on what the market is, right? So you were learning a lot.
Sure.
You already knew some good amount of stuff from being an MBA, but now you're actually getting experience.
Sure.
Is that when you started to say, like, I can own that, or I could buy that this way?
You know what, Ryan? Like, this was all like, I got to rewind the hands of time again. So now I'm like, call it 17. So my uncle, my godfather, was, or I should say is, a serial entrepreneur. And he went to chiropractic college in Georgia. And when he was in chiropractic college in Georgia, he met a guy that was doing some apartment property foreclosures in Georgia. So my uncle, who is just a dynamite guy, moves back to New Jersey as a chiropractor and sets up these chiropractic offices. And back in the 90s, when you would do chiropractics, the insurance company would basically pay for all of your treatments.
Yeah.
So if you were set up properly, meaning you had offices, you had good infrastructure, right? You had tight billing, you can make a bunch of money. So my
And
uncle's
those
relation,
chiropractors cleaned up for a long
100%.
time. Insurance companies got real
100%.
smart on them.
That got real tight.
Yeah.
But if you think about what it was like in the 90s, if you were set up well, like I said, and you had, relationships out of state, which, like I said, when he was going to chiropractic college in Georgia, he met a guy that was doing apartment deals, right? Like buying foreclosures in the Sun Belt, Georgia, Florida. I guess it really started off in the suburbs of Atlanta. So my uncle moves back to New Jersey, sets the offices up, starts making a bunch of money. He's taking the capital and sending it to his joint venture partner in Georgia, and these guys are buying apartment buildings, right? Or I should say, like foreclosures that graduate to larger deals. Fast forward, now I'm 17, 18 years old. My uncle's doing really well with these apartment properties in the Sun Belt, and I'm just like, who is like, you just, if you're curious, right?
What's going on here? Explain
you start
me.
to like try to see things, and you're getting older, and you're like, just, if you have a curious mind, like you're searching, right?
Yeah.
The great phrase.
Yep.
Finding is reserved for those that search. So I'm seeing things, and I'm just like, I asked my dad. I said, "What is this guy?" He's like, "Oh, he owns apartments." And my dad put it perfectly, because it even makes sense today. It's so clear today. He's like, people need a place to live. So what these guys were doing was they were buying value add apartment deals. What I mean by value add is like you buy a property, you fix it up, you boost the rents, and you force the appreciation of the property. Rather than like buying a property and just kind of sitting and waiting for the property to appreciate from the market uplift, you are forcing the appreciation because you're buying something that needs work, has vacancy, right? Is in really in disrepair.
distress, yeah.
It's in duress, exactly. So when I first met this guy, I was like, wow, this is what it means to be sort of I don't like the term landlord. You want to call it apartment operator, but this was my first clarity, my first understanding of what is a landlord and what is an apartment building. And once I kind of wrapped my mind around the apartment building stuff, when I got my real estate license, I was like, you know what, I'd like to do apartment building related stuff rather than homes, because I just thought that apartment buildings were...
That's where you're going to end up.
Yeah, and also like, if you think about it as a young guy that's doing sales, if you want to do business with business people, then you probably should be doing something in commercial real estate. Even though like you can do really well with residential real estate, and I think it's a good plan to do residential and buy commercial, I think at the time, again, pre-Instagram, pre any of that stuff, there's a serious limitation on exposure.
Yeah.
And at that time I was like, okay, if I get into selling apartment buildings, it'll help me learn how to analyze an apartment building, right? It'll help me understand what it's like to manage one. It'll help me understand what it's like to finance one. And these things kind of like, these introductions and these thought processes brought me.
They kind of came together at the right point to bring you to your conclusion of
exactly.
I want to go to this. Did you ever do any deals with your uncle and that guy?
No. They were doing stuff, in the Southeast, and I was so young. There's really no value that I could possibly add.
Yeah. It wasn't here. It wasn't like you could put in labor and.
Yeah, but what the interesting thing, and I got to thank my uncle for this, and there are going to be key people in your life, I think, as a business person, that bring you, like in a video game, they bring you to the next level.
Yeah.
When I graduated, he
so true.
He said, look, you should fly down to Georgia. We'll have dinner, and I'll never forget it, man. We went out to this sushi restaurant, and
was it a high-end restaurant?
Awesome restaurant. Well, first we went to the office, and I go up to this tall office building, and I knock on the door, and I walk in, and there's like this guy at this giant mahogany desk with like a hot pink bow tie on.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow,
money, wealth.
This is like a character out of a movie, right? Then we go downstairs, and they pull around, and he had a Mercedes SLR, which, by the way, I just checked into these things. These things are still like $300,000 to $400,000.
It's wild.
I'm like kind of a car dork, this is about me. And I'm just like, wow, this is that Mercedes that has the doors that go up. So like now as like a young guy that's a car geek that wants to make some money, I'm like now
it's
in this environment, right? Like I'm like, I'm in my glory in a way. And I go into like the CFO's office, and at the time like there was no like cell phone, right? I still have this memo paperwork, like this little memo sheet today. I have it, I carry it with me. I wrote down all the books that he had in his office, because this guy was like a book a week, super militant about like getting not formally educated, but like
Knowledge,
let me get self-improvement, let me get like better, and I still have that, man. So like that was a
really
very
cool.
like impactful moment.
There's something that I've recognized in our few conversations as I got to know you. That type of stuff is important to you.
Sure.
Like you're remembering those little things along the way, and I think as entrepreneurs, no matter what field or industry you decide to go in, like we're so hard on ourselves that we sometimes don't pick those little nuggets and give ourselves little reminders along the way to go back to when we're in a certain place of either success or the valley of death, and we're trying to make it happen, right?
Sure.
And we've all been there where we've been tight and stretched to our limits and our capacity. And I think that's really cool about it, about you. And a lot of times when people start to find success, like that stuff gets glossed over.
Sure.
Like those little things that reminded you or you took from this gentleman you perceived as super successful.
Sure.
Quick car story you were telling me earlier, completely off topic, but on topic. You're at a young friend's house. You're, obviously very impressionable. You want to be successful. You go to a friend's house in Colts Neck. Guy was very successful.
Sure.
And do you remember his name?
John.
And he sees you staring at his Ferrari.
Yep.
And he's like, you want to drive it, and threw you the keys.
Yep.
That was something that was an impactful moment on you.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of those things where like, I don't know, the universe brings you to a place, right? And like you meet people, and you're just like, you meet people for maybe a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And that's sort of corny, but when I met him, and I recently saw him at a wedding, which is just so wild because it's been like 20, 25 years, but.
Did you tell him that story?
I told him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I told him was because his daughter, who's a friend of our family's, lives around the corner from me. I said, if I see you, I'm going to stop by and you can drive my car.
Yeah.
And he loved it.
And you said it. You let anybody that loves cars to drive your nice Porsche you got out there.
Yeah. So he brought me up, and that was like, these are the things.
But that's the turnaround and help the next guy. Just that little thing, right?
Sure.
My buddy Keaton, I paid him for some personal development, not so much business, but mindset stuff. And,
sure.
He was a helicopter. And I never thought anything of helicopters, right? I don't love flying, to be honest with you.
Right.
Kind of a nervous traveler. And we got up in this helicopter, and it was just like, this is fucking cool.
Sure.
Like, this is really cool. How do I afford a helicopter? And, just something simple like that. Let a kid drive your car or go for a ride. And
sure.
Something good. Our last event we just had, we got shut down by Homedale. The police were awesome about it. It's actually the fire inspector that said, no. But instead of like me just rolling in on the helicopter, we were going to take people for rides at the pre-networking event, just to give people that feeling that I have about helicopters. Because I see Ryan's got this content with helicopters. Number one, I don't own one yet, so I rent them, guys, just so, if you're already saying that about me, I admit I don't own a helicopter, but I will one day.
Sure.
And it's something that was inspired that I got that ride.
Sure.
In the mindset that I'm trying to make. Come back, I want to keep talking to you, take a quick break, and we'll come back. So hopping back in, I want to dive a little bit deeper into what your business has morphed into, which is a pretty serious real estate portfolio. And you've done a slew of different things in the different segments of real estate, flipping homes, owning apartment buildings, and many other projects. So you quickly went into targeting the apartment buildings in North Jersey, correct? How large is your portfolio now?
I would say now it's probably about 100 apartments. I don't have any partners. Over the last year or two, I've strategically sold stuff that I just think that if you look at real estate or maybe any portfolio as like a garden where you planted a bunch of stuff, right? Time passed by, you want to do some pruning, some stuff is low performing and it doesn't fit anymore. I've taken the last 18 to 24 months to get rid of some of that stuff and really just take chips off the table.
Yeah.
But the business, I would say, started, and I don't have any partners. I have capital partners, but COR Realty Capital, COR Realty Capital, which is my initials, it's just me. I have a great team, but I don't have any partners. And the business really graduated itself, I suppose, when I put emphasis on two things: passive cash flow and net worth. You know, and I just, something that I've thought heavily on for a seriously long period of time has just been like living life by design. And I think that what I mean by that is crafting a business that gives you exactly what you want, right? If I want to wake up tomorrow and, you know, read a book or come hang out with you or hang with Trevor or fly to Italy, I could probably make that work.
Yeah, and you're living life with intention. You wanted to be able to have that flexibility and autonomy.
Yes, and I also think that, and maybe this is overlooked or maybe it's not, if you're gonna design a business, I think Warren Buffett said it, like, you should design a business so that any idiot can run it, because someday one will. And my viewpoint was like, if I leave for 6 months and I leave my phone here, when I get back, what's going on?
Yeah, did I miss a beat? Is it a disaster?
Right.
You know, is everything on fire?
Right.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is like, if I run this, how do I run this business? Even starting off with no real estate, right? Just hypothetically starting off with no real estate. My intention back then was to try to run the company like an institutional real estate portfolio, because then all you can do is like, you could build staff on, but your processes don't change, right? Your ads for rent are super tight. Your accounting, if you need professional audit, within 2 weeks you can have it because your bookkeeping is tight. You're using the best software, right? You're hiring key people that are real team players. How did you learn all that? You know, I learned early, like there's this great saying, too soon old and too late smart. And I got probably the biggest influencer in my life was when I got into self-improvement and recognizing that, you know.
What did you lack in self-improvement back then? Was ego in your way? Was there a lack of confidence in certain areas?
You know, I think it's just like, I think life is like this consistent lesson in humility. And I think that everyone, even me to an extent, I mean, even more than just to an extent, we're all living in this, we're living in an ignorance.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can learn things from your own experience, right? But if you think about it, if you're only recycling your own experience, it's going to take a seriously long time to make exponential
You're
leaps.
limiting your belief.
Exactly. And you're also limiting the degree to which you can improve in a compressed period
and
of time.
And the speed, yeah.
You know, so for me, when I was 18 or 19, the first book I read, and this is like maybe so cliche, but Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like,
anybody that watches this that has not read this book, because that's been a recommendation by almost every single person, like, you need to read it.
It was just such, it was consumed so intensely by the masses. But I will say that there are so many other books about managing relationships, recognizing like, okay, I'm X years old, right? And I have these thoughts and feelings about life and business and this and whatever. But I think like I started to practice Buddhism stuff a while ago, and I'm like, that is like, this will be a forever journey for me.
Do you still practice?
I do.
Yeah.
You know.
So how does that look for you?
I think spirituality is the answer to everything.
Yeah, we're definitely in a battle right now in the
Yes.
universe, like good versus evil.
Yes.
It is like more than ever. And I was raised very Pentecostal, strict.
Sure.
You know, call it right-wing Christianity. I don't practice like my parents did. I'm not a massive believer in church, but I'm a believer in spirit, good. There is a God. There is a better thing, and there is an evil out there. The devil, call it, right? For lack of whatever else it is. And I think the more we could tap into that and try to, and I try not to preach that on other people too much, but live by it and by your actions, I think you end up living a happier, better life. Less friction.
100%. And I also think that one thing I picked up early is when you're young, you're developing an identity, you're developing an ego, and that's okay, right? Like, if you have kids, you know you're showering them with praise, you're disciplining them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at a certain point, especially as a business person, you have to recognize that you're wired a certain way, and it's probably got something to do with your parents, your grandparents, 2,500, 3,000 years of DNA. And if you take some time to turn that scope, and this is where the Buddhism stuff is so powerful, turn that scope inward and say, where are my flaws, my personality deficiencies, my blind spots? How and where are those things, and how are they holding me back? And try to sand off those rough edges and really go deep on your own psyche and recognize like you have wiring.
Is there
right?
certain aspects of that, right? Because I've done a lot of that introspective work, and some of it's hard, you know,
Sure.
like you're reliving either trauma or why am I aggressive? Like
Sure.
I was very aggressive, had a super big chip, and there's a piece of me, as much as I've turned inward, I don't think I can smooth every edge.
Sure.
Right? Is there aspects of yourself that you feel, right? You're still very competitive and wanting of more, right?
Sure.
That's an ego piece, right?
Sure.
So is there something that you look inward and be like, hey, this is probably never going to change about me? Because there's aspects I'm like, I start changing for people and then it spins on me. And I'm like, is that something I really need to change? Right? Because we can get kind of lost in our head on that too.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really great question. I think for me, it's probably that I'm super hard on myself. And I think that if you
Critical.
fancy yourself a high-performing individual, you're probably hard on other people close to you.
Yeah.
Is it good? Is it bad? Like, I try to stay away from the labels. Like, good, bad. Like, I don't know. It just is.
I think people who do excel, you are naturally hard on yourself. I'm hard on myself. Ryan, you could be healthier. Ryan, you could do more. Ryan, you could be more patient. And then.
Sure.
But I also hold Trevor to a high standard, and Matt to a high standard,
Sure.
and Chris Egger to a high standard, my wife to. Everybody around me gets held to a high standard. And a lot of times people get out of that kitchen.
Sure.
You know, because there's a lot of heat there, right?
Sure.
Like this fire pit has a lot of heat.
Sure.
And when you're trying to be a better person and you're trying to find success in life and you're trying to be a good dad, husband, so on,
Sure.
you want everybody else around you to be trying as hard as you. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's actually a special person. There's a lot of people, there's a quote yesterday or this morning I shared, and it was like, the people who truly care about you tell you the truth.
Sure.
The people who just want to make money off you care about themselves.
Sure.
And they tell you lies.
Sure.
Something along those lines. I'm totally fucking that up. Yeah. But it's cool that you have found that spiritual side, and I think more people now than ever are looking for all different types of answers in that area and realm.
Yeah, and I think honestly, like, business aside, and it's this is all going to be like personal application, but it's the answer to relationship building, right? It's the answer to acceptance. It's the answer to probably business success. And there's books, and we can talk about this forever, but there's books on like deploying some of these principles into the world of business, because at the end of the day, it's a question of serving, right?
Yeah,
Like,
servant
you have
leadership.
to serve others,
Yeah.
you know?
I do get annoyed, I won't lie, when you're serving and serving and serving, and then everybody just taking and taking and
Sure.
taking. And you're like, dude, I can't fucking just give to you forever. I'm going to go
Right.
broke, or I'm going
Right.
to lose my energy, or
Sure.
not have time to make deposits to my wife or
Sure.
my children.
Sure.
So I agree on that. There is an aspect of like people you got to cut off, you can't serve.
Yes.
But you're totally right. If you have that servant leadership mentality, Mehran Asadi, who is the CEO of the life insurance carrier I use with all of our pension and tax planning, he has a book called Cause.
Okay.
You've probably seen it at a bunch of airports, him with his hands out.
Okay.
Mehran is, where's Mehran from? Hope he doesn't see this. I forget where he is, but he's Middle Eastern.
Sure.
And he talks a lot about servant leadership. So when you go to like President's Club or Chairman's Club, those are like the elite of elite producers in the finance space. You know, he's there handing you your drink and your napkin. It's not just like some waiter or waitress.
Right.
Yeah, just kind of that whole thought process of I could do this all the way through business and here at this award dinner.
Right.
It's pretty cool, and I think ego comes into it, and we become powerful, and we can do this and we can do that.
Sure.
And you know, that bite of humble pie is always good for me and everybody. And if you don't figure it out, life is going to force you to figure it out. And you hope at that point everything's not too far gone.
100%.
I want to jump back into real estate specific. That was cool. We're going to go turn that way, but that's why I like these conversations. So when you started buying these things, right, we're giving someone real estate nuggets.
Sure.
You say you don't have partners. Now you have investors.
I have capital partners.
Yeah, you have capital partners. How were you getting these deals done kind of on your own? How were you going to the bank? Where were you bringing on investors? When did you know you had to bring on more, right? Because some of that stuff starts getting speed. How do I get more, but I'm laying out all my capital. I'm building these things. I'm forcing the appreciation.
Sure. Well, let me just say this for sort of the newbies, right? Like the difference between, say, a standard partner, if you will, and a capital partner is a capital partner puts capital into a deal on a situational basis. They get paid whatever the negotiated monthly and point payout is. And once the deal is sold or refied, they're out. There's no equity, right? So if you create X dollars of equity, your capital partner really, they don't benefit by any upside, right? So basically, I took my real estate commissions from selling apartment buildings. And in 2015, 2016, I was selling apartment buildings in Essex County. And I sort of just recognize that like there's a really disjointed, value proposition here, because much of the town, right, whether it's Newark or Irvington, much of these pockets of North Jersey where they were hardest hit by the great financial crisis were vacant, right? And you need people to go and breathe life back into these communities and put these properties back together and provide housing. And at that time, I would literally just, I took my real estate commissions and I bought the first deal, which was a Wells Fargo 2-family foreclosure. That wasn't the first deal that I ever bought, but practically speaking, when I kind of left brokerage at that time and started getting into being a owner-operator full-time, that was the first deal that I bought. So I took commissions, I bought the deal, and I raised hard money for that deal. So I put up some money, hard money, put up money for that project. The project went really well. I did another one. And then on the third one, I earned enough sort of character value for the investor that the investor was like, look, you have a proven concept. Like I like working with you. And he said, look, I have $1 million. I'll send you $1 million.
Now, where'd you find that investor for someone who's watching?
So
a lot of times that's the biggest thing. I don't have anybody around me that's gonna give me $1 million.
Sure, completely agree. At that time, I was still chatting. Well, first of all, I knew of hard money. There are institutional hard money companies out there, right? Companies that are specifically designed.
It's like a streamlined approval process. It's a lot less than a typical mortgage process.
And they also have unlimited capital.
Yeah.
It's not a high net worth individual. It's a company that I've worked with a company in California, Anchor Loans.
Those guys here locally.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know what
there's Alpha, there's a lot.
Yeah.
That part of real estate has gotten very robust. Like there's a lot of creative
what do you think
lenders
about hard
out there.
money, right? So a lot of people hear hard money, they think shark, or they think risky, right? Because again, you're an uneducated investor, uneducated real estate person.
Sure.
What's your take on hard money?
Well, my take beyond, like zooming out, my take is the following, and this is for all the real estate guys out there. Your job is to mobilize capital and arbitrage using real estate as the vehicle to do so. So like, forget about the fact that it's a house or a multifamily property or an industrial property. Your goal as an investor, and this might even be beyond real estate, your goal is to mobilize and energize capital at a greater rate than your borrowing rate, right? Like this is sort of simple to understand. Like if I'm borrowing money from you at 7, but I'm making 20, I'm mobilizing capital in a very productive, effective way. I'm compounding money very quickly. So for me, it was just really basic math, and I'm not a math guy, but my viewpoint was like, if I can borrow money between 8 and 10% or 8 and 11% and a couple points, but my net dollar value is 20 to 30 or 18%, depending on the capital, like I'm mobilizing capital in a good way. And there's something else that I think people need to realize, like you only get paid 2 ways the complexity of the problems you solve or the amount of money that you move around.
Money in motion.
Right? So you have to have money in motion or you have to solve a very complicated problem. Like look at Elon Musk, right? The guy sends rockets to space. That's a complicated problem.
Yeah.
And even boiling it down to something more simplistic, like building a home. For most people, building a home that's a complicated endeavor, right?
Yeah.
There's math, there's materials, there's labor, there's acquisition of land, there's analysis of land,
Permits,
there's all the
there's problems
macro risk, right? So I think that at the time, I just recognized that, first of all, I started off with no money. I don't have a balance sheet family. I didn't have a sugar daddy, right? Like I was like, I'm gonna take my dollars and buy the least expensive but highest value product, which is
Earn
sort
my
of
way
lower
up.
income housing, and just parlay the capital up. So after I did a couple deals and sort of proved out my concept, which is nothing new, right?
I took us
my
off track, but
concept was
where did you
nothing new.
get this guy, the investor?
So I had the institutional capital, right? I got hard money, that capital that I had already borrowed from around that time, and also met this gentleman, this investor, through a family friend. So, I was also doing other things more creatively, like I was running ads, in the Wall Street Journal for like raising capital for real estate deals.
Do you think something like that still works with print? So I also heard you say you'd go on like Craigslist and look for a deal or other random places.
I would say I've made 7 figures off Craigslist, but I think that was also like a sign of the times. I mean, I went on Craigslist recently and like there's stuff out there, but in 2015, 2016, 2014, there were people, owners, I'm saying, not just random civilians, but there were real estate owners that were selling their properties, and also like the macro factors were different, right? Like
they were making move ups. So just like you're making a move up now and getting some pieces off the game board, they were doing the same, right?
Or they were just people that fancied themselves as more capable than their local broker, and they didn't want to pay a 5 or 6 point brokerage fee. Instead, their viewpoint was like, if I can do a deal direct, I have control over it, I can negotiate it, I can save the fee, and in that instance, I think there's opportunity, because one thing that people should realize in real estate, and this is what makes real estate very tough, especially in the Northeast, like, I can't speak to some of these other markets like Ohio and some of these more Midwestern markets where like they don't have Metro New York capital competing for deals. I can say that like a large issue in real estate, sort of in general, but specifically here, is things are very perfectly priced.
Yeah.
Right? Like if
Super
something's perfectly
competitive.
priced, like it's very hard for you to wring value out of that and propel the dollars forward. Because the only way that you can accelerate your path, starting from zero, the only way you can accelerate your path to 10, 15, 20, 30 million is by taking product, forcing appreciation, taking dollars out, and recycling the capital
keep
into
moving.
new deals.
Yeah.
Which is very different than like, hey, Ryan, you want to buy a deal? We'll put up 25%. We'll get a loan at 75% LTV, and we'll just kind of sit here and wait. Very different business. I mean, if value add real estate is like identifying the deal in a variety of ways, number one. Number two,
How do you underwrite your deals? Do you have a specific type of formula that you really look at?
it really depends. Like if you're gonna buy and fix a single family home,
It's a lot different.
that's a lot different. Like
Yeah.
I bought a 24 unit 2 months ago. That's going to be a completely different underwriting process. But I think that there are things that are very similar. Like you need to identify deals, right? And then the most important thing I think probably is like you need to understand a little bit about construction, financing, and real estate itself. And if you think about it, like most real estate agents don't know a lot about construction, or at least not enough to get through like a comprehensive project, right? Like most contractors don't know about real estate or financing. Most financing guys don't know a lot about underwriting real estate necessarily, or the construction. Like they may know how to underwrite real estate from a banking standpoint, but they're not going to underwrite real estate as an investor necessarily, and they're certainly not going to understand construction.
Yeah, they don't understand all the line items,
Yeah.
and if you have such slim margins on each one
Right.
of those, you gotta get those dialed in.
Right. And, you know, listen, to do construction, you need to know how to communicate with contractors. You need to know how to put together a contract with a contractor. You need to know how to, like, work with them, right? Like, these are hardworking guys, right? They're trying to feed their families. These are guys that a lot of times are not staffed up properly.
Yep.
Right? Like, they're running around trying
I think
to do a
that's
great
due to
job.
everybody went to damn college instead of learning trades.
Yeah, it could be.
There's a lot of big builders out there that have great businesses and no one to pass them down to. You know, even builders down here in Bay Head and Malokan.
100%.
Popovich and Rick Cole, I don't think they're doing too poorly.
But I think, like, this is something I learned very early too. Like, you as a business person, right, is that's the marquee.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, if you're a plumber, okay, there's a leak here, there's an issue with this permit. Like, most plumbers, the technical component of being a plumber will solve those problems.
Mm-hmm.
But the business mentality of growing a plumbing company will have less to do with those technical components and more to do with, like, how do I follow up with people? What's the right way to communicate with people? What are my time frames for responding? Okay, maybe my next hire is not another technician, it's another person in the office that can help field these calls, right? So, like, that's the business, right? Like, the technician and the creator are different people.
Well, there's guys who strap the boots on, and then there's the CEO.
Sure.
My brother-in-law and sister-in-law, Matt and Ashley Baldwin, they own Belmar Plumbing.
Okay.
They really did a good job of just scaling that. They found a guy who scaled his plumbing company, sold a couple different ones for 10, 15, 20 mil.
Sure.
And they have 9 trucks now. They have a manager. They have the office. He's really building it to sell it, really understanding what PE wants. I think that's a really great point.
Sure.
A lot of those guys don't really think that way a lot of times. It's like, oh, I like plumbing, or Brian Kirby's a mutual friend of both of ours too.
Love Brian.
He's another guy. He's so smart. He's so good. Like, there's technical problems that have been in the HVAC space, and he's just somebody that he knows the answer. I call him right away. The new house I'm buying actually has it's a high velocity system, and it's all ran off of the super expensive complex thing he put in years ago with Fujitsu. Sure. Brian's the first guy I called, but I always bust Brian's chops. I'm like, Brian, you could scale this up, dude. You have the brain for it. Sure. You have the knowledge. Like, I just kind of like doing the things, and I like being home with my kids and being able to get on my boat, and I understand that too.
I think, whether you're a business operator or an investor, there's so much personal choice attached to this stuff.
Yeah, well, that's the freedom side.
Yeah. Like, people have asked me for years, Chris, why don't you raise a bunch of capital and go to the Sun Belt and go here and go there and have 1,000 units? And listen, maybe that's in my future, but I had first goals, life by design, net worth, passive cash flow, being completely independent, right? Like, these were first goals.
Family
right?
man.
Trying to be a good father, a good husband, which, by the way, not,
easy to do.
Not easy to do. Trying to stay in good shape, as you get older, even younger, it's hard.
Yeah,
being really
very
good
hard.
shape.
Especially when you're running in business. You're running, you're shot out, your capacity shot out,
And when I was younger, I told myself, look, I gave away my 20s. I was telling Trevor this, I didn't do shore houses. I didn't get a real job. I actually never got like a normal W-2 paycheck. Never. I didn't go on vacations really. I didn't know if I would get married. I just was like I was hard on my goal. I gave away a lot of my 20s, and I'm not saying I did it perfectly. I'm just saying that, but in the midst, what I told myself was, like, I will work 12, 15 hours a day, but I will not sacrifice my health. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was like the Buddhist stuff that was creeping in, or maybe that was just me being sort of rational and mature at that time about it. But I'm just like, this is all for naught if I don't feel well. If I can't give, if I can't be putting others on because I don't have the energy. I think so much of it is just about energy and time, because it's just all we have.
Yeah, it's everything. I love a good bourbon. I would drink a bourbon every podcast. I'm drinking water here tonight because of that. Because I know that if I drink a couple bourbons, I'm tired tomorrow. I don't get to the gym.
Sure.
I got another podcast tomorrow night. And I then have date night Saturday night. I got to show up for my wife. And I think business ownership, whether it's real estate, HVAC, plumbing, finance, whatever it may be, it's a life that you want to live. And I think everybody kind of goes the wrong way. I think you should start with what you want. So
Sure.
life by design,
Sure.
living with intent,
Sure.
and then work backwards from there. So if I want to live in Rumson in a beautiful custom home like you have, and have a particular lifestyle and send my kids to a particular school, like I can't go work at Wendy's. It's never going to get me there, right? Or I can't go work, just driving a truck and making $100,000 a year. I need to work a job that's going to let me get to that goal.
Sure.
But I think we start at what we want out of life, not just the material things, but the time and all these things that we desire to live. Like I want to be able to go to the mountains every winter, whether I own or rent, or it's out west in Montana, or it's here in the Catskills. I want to go live that mountain life with my family and pretend I'm a mountain man for 3 to 4 months a year. And I've built a business that gives me the flexibility to go do that.
Sure.
And that's extremely important to me. I know it makes my wife happy. It's making memories with my kids. And that's going to pay me a lot longer than money will, is our time. It's the most valuable asset we have.
Sure is.
Keeping on the real estate front, what is some real looked over things about real estate that you have discovered along the way that you think is important for a new person going in or someone that's looking to grow the current real estate business they have?
Sure. I think for people that want to get into real estate, whether they're going to do it as a side hustle, right? Or whether they're going to burn the boats, so to speak, and go into it full time, I think like probably a niche focus at the beginning is smart, because it's a very vast field.
So much to know.
Right. So like if your viewpoint is like, okay, how do I become a real estate guy? Now, what I mean by that is like your core competency is real estate, right? And like you make your majority of your dollars and you support your life through doing real estate transactions, right? When you find a property, the first question is, should I buy it? Right? The second question is, should I wholesale it? The third question is, should I broker it? So like if you start off with the foundation of getting the real estate license, right? And then you kind of dial into your product type. From there, probably the simplest way to do it is to either be in brokerage, which right now is a tough value proposition. It's incredibly tough. The other part of it is wholesaling. I mean, wholesaling real estate is the gateway. It's the gateway drug into doing real estate deals.
It's kind of like Airbnb hacking now.
Yeah, I mean, the Airbnb crew, they're actually, I guess, taking title and they're almost becoming like mini hotel operators, which, like I'm perfectly ignorant to that business. Like I get it. I've stayed in Airbnb, but that's a tricky one to scale. And like you have a lot of government risk. Like there's some municipalities that will come in and shut that down.
Just took it away. Other towns are no Airbnb.
They have risk. But in terms of like growing a business out of it, I would say maybe the first step is identify what product type you want to be in, right? And how do you generate cash? But immediately after that, I think one of the first things that you need to plant the seed of, for my opinion, passive cash flow. Because what will happen is you will then get into this mode where you stop worrying about short-term dollars, right? And you will just in terms of satisfying your life, and you will start to just get cash flow coming in, right? But you're building wealth, but you're creating independence and growth because now you have your time. And
when
with
did you
time,
move
you have
into the
creativity.
flips? Once you had that dollar amount you wanted in your head on a passive cash flow perspective, is that when you started to grab these one-off flips? Were you doing them all the time?
I made a very big mistake. I made an incredibly huge mistake in real estate. In 2017, I shifted my focus away from multifamily because quite frankly, I was exhausted. It was a lot to manage. We are in a state where there's a lot of political risk. There's a lot of landlord-tenant risk. And I had just done a lot of multifamily, in a very short 2-3 year period of time.
Yeah, you had enough.
And people, interestingly enough, people think that, you bought property in 2014, 2015, that was good fortune. But, back then no one wanted to buy it, right? And I saw this window of opportunity for me to go in and buy as much as I could. But there are other factors. When the market turns down, there are other factors that people these days, especially people that were not around then, like you just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
But back then, you had a very big issue. Like your issue was like you bought a foreclosure, right? You fixed it. You released it to good people. You have leases, you have documentation. If you did that all in like an 11 or 12 or 13 month time frame, you now were dealing with an appraiser that had no incentive to help you with a cash out refi, because now you have all the shadow inventory of foreclosures and very few lenders. Like you were always going to a creative lender that was like 5-year interest only at a higher than conventional
How do you
rate.
find the creative lender?
It's one of those things where like you need a sleeve of those guys,
Yeah.
because lending is always changing. Like we talked about before, lenders are like always coming in and out of a market. You need relationships, you need a sleeve of lenders, you need a little bit of a pitch deck, right? And like one thing I recognized back then was, and I think the real estate people will appreciate this, I was recording additional loans as construction so that my refis were not cash out refis, they were rate and term. Mm-hmm. So back then it was like there are different terms and availabilities of loans for cash out refis in that kind of environment.
So
Even
you were
now,
positioning yourself to be looked at from a better point of view from the banks.
for sure, more financeable. I mean, because the only way for you to keep the business going is to take the dollars back out and recycle them.
Yeah.
So like you got to play within the rules, but you got to learn the rules.
I want to use the banks as least as possible. I'm like on the total other spectrum of that. Like,
Yeah, look,
there's
yeah.
private money everywhere. There's
Yes.
wealthy people everywhere that want to bet on you,
Yes.
that need tax write-offs,
Yes.
right? The hard money's out
Yes.
there.
But Ryan, back then is like there was some hard money, but that space has opened up a lot.
Yeah.
Like in 2012, 2013, like,
No, I'm not challenging that
there.
you did it wrong. There's so many different ways to skin a cat,
Sure.
but I totally get being from the finance business. Even when we do compliance,
Sure.
when I roll over $1 million, I'm like, well, what's this going into? What are the
Sure.
other assets they hold?
Sure.
They look at them as a balance sheet. Are they going to need this money soon? You're putting them in a 5-year surrender product.
Sure.
This is an annuity with an income spigot on the back end.
Sure.
I understand how the institutions operate and move. Don't necessarily agree all the time, but
Sure.
if you're someone looking to scale into the apartment space like you did,
Sure.
Having a bank was probably very helpful.
Yeah, look, you have to figure out, regardless of the market, like even right now, I can say I'm bidding on deals in Jersey City, that are a few $1 million, and the financing right now, like the liquidity market's very disjointed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they want to take risk off the table.
Price points for deals are high, right? And availability of debt is low. It's almost like 5-10 years ago in Manhattan, you would have to come into your deal heavy on equity. 50% down, 40, and you would almost have to reposition the asset somehow, right? And then revisit the lender and say, look, we juiced the income this much.
You say reposition the asset. I think I know what you mean. But for someone watching, what do you mean by that specifically?
Well, we'll just take a random apartment building as an example. It doesn't really make a difference. We'll take one unit or 2 units as an example to make it like ultra simple. Something is a large, awkward 1-bedroom, rented 20% below market for a 1-bedroom apartment. That person leaves. That resident leaves. I don't like to call them tenants. I like to call them residents. That resident leaves. Now you have this old, antiquated apartment. You take down all the walls, you recognize the value in the square feet, you reposition that as a 2-bedroom apartment, right? Now that's rebuilt as a 2-bedroom because you recognize the construction value, you recognize the rental value when that's done. So that rent went from, $950 to now $1,500, right? 3 years has gone by. You've renovated that unit from a 1-bedroom to a 2. You've boosted all the other rents, whether it's because people moved out, they were evicted, whatever. Now you revisit the lender. You have X amount of equity in the deal. Now you get it reappraised, right? And you get new debt. Mm-hmm. So you're taking these deals on a 3 to 5 or 7-year time horizon. And that's part of I think understanding how to be savvy in real estate is recognizing where is the hidden value in this asset? How do I unlock that value and monetize that at some future date?
And that also takes, capital up front.
Of course.
You're doing the construction there. You're
course.
taking all those walls down.
Of course.
Rebuilding it. You have to
Sure.
be, again, very good and tight
Sure.
on your pencil and making sure you really understand all the aspects of it. You said something in our first conversation about leases and how you have really become a student of New Jersey, New York, and understanding how the leases work.
Sure.
For a lot of people that don't maybe know, you have rental controls, and that's really hard when inflation hits and gas prices are going up and
Sure.
electric bills going up, and
Sure.
you're sitting here in this building. This was one time very profitable, now coming a lot less profitable when I have all this risk on the table.
Right.
You really better understand how leases work. What is kind of like your thought process on that?
Well, if I had to say that, like, we have a USP, unique sales proposition at my company, I would say it's like we place a ton of emphasis on residents. Like, I don't want anyone moving out. If you're gonna move out, we want to talk to you about that, because I will do almost anything for you to stay.
Now, why? Because you just don't want to requalify somebody else. You lose in a month or two.
Probably for a variety of reasons. Number one, economically speaking, for the business overall, when people move out, it's where you effectively lose the most amount of money, right? Because if they move out on good terms, that's fine. You still have to churn the unit, and if you're a very conscientious operator, it's probably going to take you 30 to 90 days to refill that unit. So if they're paying $1,000 a month, you're
it's
talking
lost rent roll.
about at minimum $3,000 to $4,000 loss.
And from your experience, and again, my buddy Jay Koopman, he's got all the multifamilies out in PA.
Sure.
Like you have to go in and now do fresh paint.
Sure.
Do I have to add a sink?
Sure.
A shower head.
Sure.
I'm sure you have costs there as well.
Yeah, you got turnover costs, right? You have, you also have the risk. Like, I know who was here. She was great. He was great. Now we're going to go back out to the market and vet new prospective clientele, and that's fine. But it's better if they don't move out.
Yeah.
So, like, first order of business is keep the heads in the beds, because in the apartment game, like, all of your dollars are lost for the most part on things like turnover and construction. Now, some turnover in construction is good. Like, when you buy buildings and you have grandfathered in residents that are paying, we'll just make up numbers, they're paying $825 and the true market rent is $1,250. You want to graduate them closer to the market, but if they move out through attrition or an eviction or something, then that's your opportunity to monetize that gap.
So making sure you have the right leases, understanding your current laws is extremely important.
But I also think that, like, maybe this sounds a little cheesy, but being an owner-operator, that's a community service business in many ways. Like, you're providing housing to the community, right? And if you can do a superior job doing that, you will make great cash flow. And there's very few landlords out there with 5-star Google ratings, because I think for a few reasons. Number one, people are looking at real estate as like cash flow.
Yeah, it's an
right?
investment.
Right, so they're just like, they're
not thinking
pounding
people.
away, right? They're not, exactly right. They're not thinking people, they're not thinking community. Like, when I turn over apartments, I think of, like, all right, there's a kid that lives in this unit, right? Like, he is gonna have memories in this unit. How do we make this, like, equitable for the kid? And I think that there is an undeniable relationship between placing emphasis on residents, right, and having good cash flow.
Yeah, I mean, in any business, placing emphasis on your clientele.
Like, we give out Christmas gifts, we give out holiday gifts. We upon lease renewals, we try to give a credit for that. If someone's having an issue, we try to, like, really go deep on that issue. Like, hey, did you lose your job? Here's, like, a community board in your municipality for how you can hopefully get a new job.
Yeah.
Here's a list of subsidies that can help you in this tough time. Here's, like, when people reach out to the office, if they have super low credit, we tell them, look, we'd love to be able to help you in the future. If your credit app is accurate, you should go to a credit repair company and address this so that you can get the apartment that you want at some future date.
Yeah, you're trying to give education, education.
Or if you want to be a homeowner at some future date, like, you got to clean some of this stuff up.
Yeah.
Because we fully recognize that, like,
Life happens.
in the
life gets
educational
hard.
system too, aside from some people being from environments where they're not conducive to these types of things, these types of
never taught it.
understandings,
Yeah.
school doesn't talk to you about credit.
Yeah.
No one told me in my high school I could be a real estate developer.
Mm-hmm.
No one told me I could be a landlord. Those things were never brought to my attention as possibilities.
Be a doctor.
And I was one of those kids where, like, hey, this guy's social. He doesn't love school. He tries hard, but he's not a scholastic, superstar.
Yeah, he's not going to be a professor at Harvard.
Yeah, so I wasn't part of that tranche. But anyway, point is that I think that it's a community serving business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good way to look at it.
And I also think that, just generally speaking, like, residents need to know what they're being charged. Right, that lease is the contract, the understanding of, like, what we provide.
It's transparent for them, but also protects you.
100%. Then everyone gets an online tenant resident portal. That resident portal has every charge. It has complete transparency. And I think that, like, you have to have that intersection of compassion and strength.
Yeah.
Because there are people out there that are, like, they're professionals, and you want to manage that. And then there's a lot of people out there that just need guidance.
Yeah.
And if you could supply them with guidance and great housing and they stay and pay, it's an absolute win.
Now, staying on the apartments, having 100 apartments, it's a lot of work, a lot of upkeep, turnover, new construction. Do you have a management company that you bring in, or you keep it all in-house?
We have supers. We have 2 or 3 accountants. We have a great office team.
And your accountants kind of run the asset management side of it.
They run the dollars.
Yeah. And those are in-house?
We outsource the bookkeeping. My CPA is obviously a local guy.
Yep.
I've been with him since 2007. Super important in real estate and in business. Don't necessarily go off friend or family referrals. Find the people that are, like, my
know what you do.
My CPA has been, like, a tried and true real estate CPA, like, to the point where, like, I go sit down with financial advisors, and at the end of the meeting, they're taking notes on what I'm telling them for how this business is set up.
What are you sitting down with those advisors for? To raise money?
Guys that are pursuing me for financial planning, whether it be life insurance and stuff like that, which I've used life insurance to leverage into real estate.
Yeah.
I think I've done that decently well.
It's a great product.
It's a great
product.
leverage
point, right?
Something something that no one told me.
Velocity of money.
Exactly.
I sell a lot of life insurance, about $1 million of premium a year, and
Right on.
in that space, real estate really specific, but business ownership as well.
Sure.
Understanding, again, the velocity of money. When you, just for a quick lesson, because we brought it up, I try not to talk about what I do too much on the podcast, but when you take money out of an insurance contract, and depending on if it's an IUL or a whole life, it's a little bit different to loans, but you suck that money out, just think of it conceptually and simply as that money stays in there earning that rate of return. You're borrowing it from the general account of the insurance carrier at 4% versus the bank loan, especially right now, that's 8,
Sure.
7, right? That's a big spread, and then you can make money on that money. So what's my external rate of return?
Sure.
So making a return here, I may make money on the loan, and I make money on that external investment that I took that cash from.
Sure.
So now you're making 3 rates of return on the same $1.
Sure.
That's the financial system we're in.
Yeah.
Life insurance is still one of the most underutilized financial vehicle because people don't connect their mind to the tool, and there is bad advisors.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think if people can think of themselves as a business where they have, like, a personal economy, I think it would help maybe, like, crack this mindset of, like, I go to work and my employer manages my future for me.
Become your own bank.
Exactly right. And I think that, like, when I was in my early 20s reading books, I'm like, if you're going to set up life by design, you need to have a little bit of clarity about how these things can serve you, how you can serve your community by using these tools. And I think it's, like you said, it's very overlooked.
Some of the wealthiest families, you read some of those old books. I mean, talk about life insurance and how they utilized it for land, collateralization,
Sure.
and then.
Sure.
So these are some of the richest families, they own the central banks.
Sure.
Banks are the biggest owners of life insurance. It's a tier 1 asset on their balance sheet.
Right.
And then you can get real complex, right? You can fund the premium. So you're a guy with a bunch of assets, instead of taking any cash flow out because your cash flow is earning a 26% rate of return, you can go and finance the premium because Chase Bank is all in on it with you.
Right.
So now they're funding your premiums for you to have that leverage and then use the money in the future.
Right.
It's called premium finance. It's really creative. Now you're really leveraging 6 times, right?
Sure.
So it's 3 to 1 on the dollar on then funding the premium than what your external rate of return is.
Well, this is also why I think it's very important to have a good team.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm not a life insurance expert, right? Like, everyone's going to have their contribution value, but I think like getting the right CPA, getting the right financial advisor, getting around the right people that are doing deals, which is way easier, by the way, these days. In 2005, 6, it was like, I think I know a guy that knows a guy, and it was like a lunch meeting, but now it's like, but even then, and I'm not sure if this is like an age thing, but I've noticed that a lot of like the older guys, not to like disparage any class, I'll just be super general, like guys that are over, say, 50, 55, like the culture of sharing is not as intense as it is now. Like, I'm perfectly willing to have people come to my office and like, hey, let's go through it. Like my latest flip, I'm gonna do a webinar on my latest flip. I'm gonna give every single detail.
Make sure we get
out.
that link. We'll drop it with your episode next week.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
See if we get on that.
And these are things that like, I'm not doing it because I think that it was the greatest thing ever. I'm doing it because if I look back at my 22-year-old self, like my path would have been accelerated exponentially if I had someone to be like completely honest and truthful about it. And I'm not sure how much of that's going on online right now. You guys know better than me.
Yeah, it's tough because there's a lot of guys online that could be fraudulent. I tell people, like, I don't have $10 million liquid yet. I think all this money and capital I put into all of this and the goodwill, I forced, almost like you forced those valuations of those properties up. I forced the valuation of Ryan up by giving.
Sure. And
living with a purpose. Now, is there an indirect way that I make money off of all that? Of course there is, right? Because I have more eyes on me and people get to hear what I do.
Sure.
But it's, giving, eventually you'll get, right? Someone's going to come on that webinar like a Trevor who's young, hungry, and motivated, and you guys will end up doing a deal together.
Sure.
So I think more people should continue to turn around. And the Northeast is the worst. You go out to Utah, Montana, Cali, all those guys share.
Yep.
And as much as they maybe all kind of still shit talk each other, they all still kind of still work together and make money and help forge the goals forward.
Sure.
Here in the Northeast, it's like super competitive and everybody's hush hush, and I think we all need to share more, and I know you're of that mindset.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I think like...
Sorry about that. You're getting smoked by that.
No, that's okay. You're
some wet wood over there.
I'm tougher than I look. You're only going to be able to do what your market gives you. Like we were talking about the immigration waves in New Jersey. It leaves us with like a lot of smaller product, right? We're also like, we're Metro New York, Metro Philly. It's competitive to get deals here. It's kind of always been that way. You go to different markets where there's less capital, less mobility of capital, you're taking basically kind of like in some ways like expert players and bringing them down a level or two, right? Because the access is it's a different access point.
Yeah.
Not to like be overly scientific about it, but I think we're both of the same mindset. We're trying to graduate the culture of sharing in the area because at the end of the day, if you think about it, you need multiple pistons pumping on the income, the income disparity, right? And one way to do that is by doing joint ventures and collaborating on deals to do larger deals and spreading the risk in those deals.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking specifically about real estate, but also this probably is like, you can generalize this into other businesses.
Well, just even think like we're able to collaborate and you've shown interest in joining the pit. You can come on and do a webinar for our group, and there's real estate people in there. Lyndon, I put you on the phone with, and Nick Vasili, and these other guys that are doing different things all around the country and in different aspects of real estate. Now you and I become friendly. We're able to get deals. We're able to raise some money together, and like, guess what? I am in finance. I do all that high-end life insurance planning. I have literally taken hundreds of clients through that specific strategy and showed them how to buy businesses, real estate, cars, whatever it may have been, right?
Sure.
Family properties. And then on the back end, showing them how you still want that death benefit as a permission slip to exit out of that.
Sure.
So now I'm a guy that you learn to build trust with, and Ryan actually knows what he's doing. There's something in that for me in the long haul too, and that's collaborating online. I have a platform that you never had the desire to build, nor was it available.
Sure.
So like you said, you worked backwards. You actually did the work first.
Sure.
And found success and made the money, and now you're looking to get on the platform, turn around and give back. I have a platform.
Sure.
I have an audience. This podcast has been pretty popular
Sure.
in the area. So now we're able to collaborate. So there's all different types of ways to collaborate. And I think a lot of times if you're of that abundance thought process, and again,
Sure.
you have to keep the takers and the greedy people at bay, but there is good people. You will find that diamond in the rough, and
Sure.
you guys can make a lifetime of money together and memories,
Sure.
which I think is the most fun part about it.
Sure.
I met Trevor, his wife was our nanny at the time, 3-4 years back. And she's like, you got to talk to him. This kid went from trucking to making $500,000 a year. Like, I don't sit there and say that was all me. It was absolutely Trevor. It was mostly Trevor.
Right.
But I was a big part of seeing that. That's pretty fucking cool.
100%.
And that's going to be beneficial to me for a long time, financially and as a friend. He's become a great friend.
100%.
Well, we've talked a lot. I don't even know how long we've went, but I like to ask 2 questions at the end. First question is there anybody you want to give some love or a shout out to, whether it be real estate people who are impactful on you? Obviously, we talked about your parents a lot.
Yeah. I think, of course, always family, right? They give you the foundation. They give you the cornerstones of
Starting
making
out.
something happen. And then maybe if I could dedicate it to my buddy that passed.
Yes.
And for anybody out there that's like over leveraged, right? Or doesn't know what to do,
Yeah, call somebody.
talking probably helps. Game planning with people
Yeah.
for like a strategy to get out of that, staying away from like, the drugs that you think may help you allay that stress is productive.
Yeah.
So like just open up the conversation about mental health in that way, especially guys that are going for it in business.
Yeah. A lot of times we feel like we're on our own,
Yeah.
and you're not. That's again the pit is all about. Not to
Yeah.
plug it again, but that's
Yeah.
what it's all about, man. You're all in this fight together.
And when you're ultra stressed and it's like things are like
Walls are
ultra
closing in.
zoomed in,
Yeah.
and really like that's actually not reality.
Yeah. And
Right,
in your
like-
head it is.
Yeah, in your head it is. There's the appearance, the perception of reality, but like sometimes you need to zoom out.
And a thought with that, and we won't go into specifics, but I think really having a set of core values that you roll with, no matter how lucrative a deal or partnership may be,
Sure.
does that person fall within that window of your core values has really helped me stay out of trouble. Because there's things that have been put in my face that seem super lucrative, but
Sure.
something about that person, that street smart in me,
Right.
reads like, you may not be a terrible person, but I don't think I'm going to touch that because
Right.
there's a gray area there I'm not willing, to press on.
Right.
Some I am, right? The tax code and
Sure.
different things that are legal, but other stuff I just stay away from. And I think that keeps us in a little bit more of a clear headspace as
Sure.
people going for it. That's great. I'm really sorry to hear about that too. Rest in peace.
Appreciate it.
Second question. We talked about this a little bit, real estate specific, but any entrepreneur going for it, because that's what you are. You're an entrepreneur. What is the one thing you would tell them? And everybody has a different answer. What's the one thing?
The one thing that I think is like critical to success.
Critical to success. It could be real estate specific. It could not be real estate specific.
Well, if I have to boil it down to like something that's like ultra short and simplistic, dedication to a vision,
Yes.
commitment to a vision,
Yeah.
discipline to a vision,
Yeah.
discipline to the imagination of your vision.
Yeah. Be committed, not interested.
Yeah, or like maybe put it another way, like the ultimate search for truth in that vision, cutting away all the excess, cutting away like all the bad advice. Maybe bad's the wrong word. Like
Wrong advice at the
yeah,
wrong
the wrong
time.
advice from the wrong source, right? Detaching the story from the advice, right? Like if you're going to give advice, detach your story from the advice. And if you're going to take advice, detach that person's story from like what you think you can pull out of it. But
You almost gotta get lost in their vision.
Yeah.
And then like help them build their vision off of theirs.
Exactly.
With your creativity.
Just be an expert generalist. Take business advice and see if it's applicable to your vision. But the imagination, the dedication to the imagination of your vision, I think is number one.
Eat the meat and spit the bones. Listen, this has been fun. I think we can do a lot of cool stuff together.
Thank you, Ryan.
I'm excited to get this out. Be a really good education piece.
Appreciate it.
Happy to learn more about you. And stay tuned next week.